All right, today we're going to unravel a really fascinating legal puzzle from the ancient Talmud. And trust me, it is an absolute masterclass in logic that shows you just how these scholars would test every single idea to get to the truth. Let's dive in.
So our whole investigation starts with this one very specific question. Imagine it's Passover, and during the sacrifice, the person performing the ritual has the wrong intention. They're thinking of the paschal lamb as a completely different kind of offering. So what's the legal status of that animal now? Well, the text gives us what seems like a pretty straightforward answer. If the intention for that paschal offering gets changed mid-ritual, it's actually still valid, but its status changes. It becomes a peace offering. Simple enough, right? But in the world of the Talmud, the what is never enough. The real journey, the fun part, always begins with why.
And this, right here, is where our detective story really kicks into gear. Why a peace offering? I mean, there are so many other types of offerings. Why not a burnt offering, or a sin offering, or something else entirely? This one question kicks off an absolutely incredible chain of reasoning.
Okay, so first, the rabbis go searching for a general principle. See, they're not just looking for an answer to this one case. They want the underlying rule that governs the entire system. Rabbi Avin steps up with a theory based on what's eaten. He suggests that offerings that are meant to be eaten can only become other offerings that are also eaten. This seems to work, right? It covers the peace offering and it excludes burnt offerings. But wait a second. The logic has a hole. Priests eat parts of a sin offering, so why doesn't it become that? And just like that, the first theory fails the test. So it's back to the drawing board. The principle gets refined. The key, it turns out, isn't if it's eaten, but who eats it. The paschal and peace offerings, see, they're eaten by everyone. But the sin offering? That's only eaten by priests. This new rule is much more precise, and it actually works. But just as we're getting comfortable with that idea, another sage, Rabbi Yossi, offers a different and frankly more elegant principle. He suggests it's not about who eats the offering at all. It's about its level of holiness. A paschal offering has a lesser sanctity, and so it can only become another offering of lesser sanctity, like the peace offering. This neatly excludes sin offerings, which are of the most sacred order. It's a really beautiful, simple rule. But is it airtight? Of course not. This is the Talmud we're talking about. The moment a new rule gets proposed, it is immediately put through the ringer. If the paschal offering can become any offering of lesser sanctity, well, then we have to consider all the other possibilities in that category. And here's how the scholars just dismantled the alternatives one by one. Could it be an animal tithe? Nope. The Torah is very specific. It says the tenth, which implies it can't be anything else. What about a firstborn? Nope, that's excluded by a special textual link. A substitute offering? Same problem. The verse says it and its substitute. Again, exclusive. A thanks offering? Well, that requires bread, which the paschal offering doesn't, so that's just illogical. One by one, they're all knocked down. So, after all of that, Rabbi Yossai's principle holds up, leaving only the peace offering. But pure logic, as elegant as it is, isn't enough. Now the rabbis need proof, a specific verse from the Torah itself to anchor the law. And what they find is, well, it's a little confusing. They don't just find one proof, they find three. Three completely different verses, and each one seems to prove the exact same point, that a paschal sacrifice that's left over or offered improperly becomes a peace offering. This creates a new, much deeper puzzle. You have to understand, in Talmudic thought, the Torah doesn't have a single wasted word, let alone entire redundant verses. It's just not a thing. So, if there are three proofs, they must each be teaching us something different. So what is the deeper meaning hidden inside this apparent redundancy? And the solution is just brilliant. It turns out each verse covers a very specific, unique scenario. The first verse? That's for an animal that's too old and it's already past Passover. The second verse is for an animal that's the right age, but it's past the first Passover. And the third verse? That covers our original case, the right animal at the right time, but with the wrong intention. So what looked like clumsy repetition is actually breathtaking legal precision. Every possible contingency you could think of is covered, each one anchored in its own specific text. The system is so much more complex and, well, perfect than we first imagined. But you didn't think we were done, did you? The inquiry never stops there. Having solved the whole puzzle of the paschal lamb, the Gemara immediately takes these principles and applies them to a new and even more complex case, the sin offering. A sage by the name of Mavog rules that a sin offering is valid even if you intended it as a different type of sin offering. And his reasoning is pretty simple. The Torah says this is the law of the sin offering singular, which implies one unified law for all of them. It's a nice, elegant rule. But then this incredibly sharp objection comes up from the laws of meal offerings. See, with meal offerings, the physical preparation, whether it's made in a pan versus a pot, that's what defines the offering, not the person's intention. For animal sacrifices, though, the slaughter is identical for all the types, so your intention is everything. This completely contradicts Mavagog's idea that all sin offerings are basically interchangeable. This objection is so powerful, it forces a really radical conclusion. The initial report of what Mavic said must be wrong. The text then just spirals into several different versions of what he might have said, each one trying to reconcile his teaching with this new, powerful objection. It just goes to show you, this is a living, breathing debate where even the primary sources are questioned and reinterpreted. And all of this leads us to our final puzzle, which comes from the sage Rava. And he pushes these principles to their absolute breaking point with this razor-sharp hypothetical. Okay, here's the case. A sin offering that's meant to atone for eating forbidden fat is slaughtered, but with the intention of atoning for a totally different sin, entering the temple while impure. The question is this sacrifice valid? The conflict here is crystal clear. On the one hand, the sins are pretty similar. They're both so severe they risk the punishment of kairet, which is spiritual excision. This would argue that yes, the sacrifice is valid. But on the other hand, the offerings themselves are different. One is a fixed animal offering. The other is a sliding scale offering that changes based on your wealth. This difference argues they're not equivalent at all. So what's the deciding factor? Is it the shared severity of the sin, or is it the different nature of the atonement? The two principles are in a direct head-to-head conflict, and the entire law just hangs in the balance. After all this incredibly rigorous analysis, we've arrived at a question with no easy answer. The Gemara's final word on this entire dilemma? Teku. This Aramaic word means let it stand. The question is so perfectly balanced, the argument so equally compelling on both sides, that no definitive conclusion can be reached. And this leaves us with the most profound takeaway of all. Sometimes the goal of the intellectual journey isn't to find a final answer, but to understand the question in all its beautiful, unresolved complexity. The debate itself is the destination.